You are not late. You are being kept. And the proof is hiding in plain sight, right inside the rules that supposedly reward hard work. Ask yourself something brutally simple. How many hours have you spent learning to get ahead? And how many hours have you spent learning how to survive inflation, housing costs, and job loss that never fully stops? Because in 2026, the system is not just failing you, it is designed to absorb you, exhaust you, and then sell you a dream you cannot cash in. This is not financial advice. This is financial education, the kind that makes you uncomfortable because it forces you to look at mechanisms, not feelings. In this video, you are going to hear 4 wealth codes that show up again and again in the way successful people think, operate, and build leverage. But we are not going to do it with soft mythology. We are going to connect it to 2026 reality. The Fed cutting and raising rates like a thermostat while ordinary workers pay the bills. AI stripping middle-class jobs. Housing prices detaching from wages across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. And a wealth concentration so extreme that the top 1% own more than ever while the average household keeps losing ground. And here is the dark part nobody wants to say out loud. Wealth does not come from being nicer, or smarter in the abstract, or working harder. Wealth comes from having fewer mental locks than everyone around you. So let's start with the first code, the one that sounds childish until you realize it explains entire generations. The first wealth code is simple. Stop treating money like a moral problem. Most people were trained to feel a tiny guilt whenever they imagine earning more. They were taught that business people are suspect and that wealthy people are either villains or lucky. They hear lines like money changes people and greed is poison, and they absorb it the way you absorb a family allergy. You do not notice it until you try to breathe, and then you realize you have been blocked the whole time. This is not just cultural, it is functional. If you believe wealth is shameful, you will hesitate before negotiating. You will undersell your value. You will avoid taking leadership roles. You will refuse to study the mechanics of profit. You will stay emotionally attached to smallness. In the Asian world, people often romanticize trade as dirty work. In the European history, landowners and industrialists were framed as exploiters, and in modern Western life, the same idea got repackaged into social media morality. The script now sounds cleaner, but it is the same trap. If you make money, you are shallow. If you chase success, you lack character. Meanwhile, the real world runs on incentives, not slogans. Picture a 32-year-old nurse named David in Phoenix. He is competent, he is respected, he takes overtime when he can, and he does it because he wants his kid to have options. But in 2026, his take-home pay is not just squeezed by bills, it is squeezed by the way prices changed after 2020 and never really reversed. According to Federal Reserve data and broader inflation measures, even when inflation cools on paper, purchasing power for many households does not snap back to the 2019 feeling. Rent rises, groceries rise, insurance rises, and the interest rate decisions that make headlines do not stay theoretical. They turn into debt payments, credit card balances, and higher costs of carrying anything. David watches videos about passive income. He hears about creators who allegedly earn while sleeping. He feels inspired for one day, then crushed for the next, because his numbers do not match the fantasy. Why? Because the fantasy never accounts for how much leverage rich people already have. Rich people borrow against assets. They manage risk using systems. Middle-class people borrow against their future labor, which AI and automation can erase faster than they can repay. Now imagine 2 mindsets at that same crossroads. David's mindset says money is hard to respect. He feels slightly dirty for wanting more. The other mindset says money is a tool. It is information. It is leverage. It is the oxygen you use to survive volatility. That difference is not about personality. It is about permission. They always talk about having the right mindset like it is some motivational wallpaper. But this is permission to study profit without shame, permission to seek opportunities, permission to negotiate, permission to build businesses that scale beyond your own 2 hands. And here is where the wealth code turns dark. They knew this psychological lock existed because they built the social environment around it. If you feel guilty for chasing money, you avoid the behaviors that create wealth. You do not invest seriously. You do not learn pricing power. You do not ask for raises with numbers in your hand. You do not build leadership inside your organization because you fear being seen as too much. And in 2026, AI makes this worse. AI now writes code faster than many entry-level workers. It drafts marketing copy before you finish your coffee. It can analyze basic data patterns that used to take a whole analyst team. The middle-class job pipeline is thinning, so the people who remain employed are not the ones with the highest moral purity. They are the ones with leverage, the ones who can pivot, the ones who understand how money moves. So no, the first code is not just be greedy. The first code is respect money enough to study it like physics, without shame, without theater, without waiting for society's approval. Stop asking, is it ethical to earn, and start asking what creates cash flow and how does the system take it from you. But that is not even the worst part. The second wealth code is that you need to stop fearing leadership. Most people do not stay poor because they lack intelligence. They stay poor because they avoid the responsibility layer where money is actually made. Leadership means being accountable for outcomes. It means decisions. It means hiring. It means taking heat from managers and customers. It means giving people clarity when they are confused. And most people are trained to believe leadership is a status game or a personality contest. They assume leaders are born confident. They assume leaders are arrogant. They assume leadership is reserved for type A personalities, so they do something safer. They become followers. They volunteer to be support. They make themselves useful in narrow ways. And when layoffs come, they are the first to go, because support roles are easiest to automate. In 2026, you can see this in real time. AI is not only replacing tasks, it is replacing coordination. It is replacing the low-level decision-making that used to require human judgment. And guess what role gets reduced first? The role that never owned a system, never owned a budget, never owned customer relationships, and never owned the business outcome. Leadership is where ownership lives. Now, people will say, I am not ready, I do not have the skills. Good. That is the correct starting point. Leadership is not pretending you are competent. Leadership is learning, and learning requires being in the position where the learning is unavoidable. Here is a micro story. A friend of mine used to manage a small sales team in the Midwest. He was not famous. He was not a genius. He was just stubborn and methodical. One day, the owner asked him to step up and run pricing changes. The friend froze. He said he was not sure. He said he did not want conflict. He said he could mess it up. The owner responded with a sentence that sounded cold but was accurate. Leadership is not a promotion. It is a training program with consequences. So he took the role, he made a mistake in week 1, he fixed it in week 2. By week 6, he had a system for discounting, a spreadsheet that connected customer segments to margins, and a playbook for follow-up sequences. His team did better, and his confidence did too. Then a recession pressure hit. The company cut costs. And do you know who survived? Not the person with the best feelings. The person who owned a process survived. The person who knew the business outcome survived. Now ask yourself, who owns your process? Because when AI replaces parts of your work, there are 2 ways to respond. Option 1 is to complain and hope. Option 2 is to move upward into control of systems. Leadership, even small leadership, even the leadership of a project, is what forces you to become valuable in ways AI cannot copy easily. AI can draft, AI can analyze, AI can suggest. But someone still has to decide what matters, who gets what, when to pivot, and which customers are served first. And that brings us to 2026 reality number 1. AI disruption is accelerating the useless class debate. You have likely seen articles about polarization, where routine roles get cut and non-routine roles become more scarce. But most people misunderstood it. They thought it meant, be creative. No. It means you must become the person who coordinates value, not just performs tasks. The uncomfortable truth is that leadership is an income multiplier, not for ego, for leverage. So if you have been waiting to feel confident enough before leading, understand what you are doing. You are waiting for the permission that never arrives. You are letting other people choose your risk level. In most families, leadership is discouraged using politeness. It sounds like be humble. It sounds like let others shine. It sounds like do not be greedy for attention. But in 2026, humility without strategy is just slow surrender. Leadership scares you because it exposes you. It forces you to be judged on outcomes, and yet outcomes are what money measures. If you want freedom, you must stop treating leadership as a moral sin and start treating it as a skill you practice. But there is a reason this gets hard, and that is where the third wealth code comes in. The third wealth code is learn to predict the future. Not in a mystical way, not in a psychic way, in a mechanical way. People hear predict the future, and they think of people with magic insight. They think of someone like a Greek oracle or a movie character who sees everything coming. That is not what we are talking about. We are talking about building pattern recognition from data, history, and cause and effect. Here is what prediction really means for your life. It means you notice leading indicators before everyone else does. It means you understand what tends to happen next based on what just happened. It means you stop being surprised by your own industry. And in 2026, survival depends on this because surprise is expensive. Consider how the interest rate environment affects ordinary people. When the Fed holds rates high, borrowing costs stay elevated. That does not only affect fancy investors, it affects small businesses, auto loans, credit cards, and mortgages. When the Fed changes rates, people assume the pain ends quickly, but purchasing power damage lingers. Housing costs take time to soften, and even when inflation prints better numbers, wages often lag behind real costs. So if you are living without prediction, you are always reacting after prices move. Now, let's go concrete. Imagine you work in a restaurant. You have 2 months where business falls off. You might blame seasonality. That is correct, but shallow. Real prediction is deeper. You build a cycle chart. You log customer counts by hour, day, and month. You record staffing hours. You track menu item performance. You analyze what changed. Did a nearby business open? Did a local insurance premium spike cause people to cut spending? Did weather events reduce foot traffic? Did a major employer announce layoffs? Once you can explain why a dip happens, you can predict when the dip will return and prepare earlier. That might mean staffing reductions. It might mean reordering inventory. It might mean changing promotions ahead of time. Now imagine a different person. They run the restaurant with vibes. They do not track data. They do not know which hours are dead. When the slump comes, they panic. Panic leads to wrong decisions. Wrong decisions destroy cash flow. In 2026, cash flow is everything. AI tools can help with forecasting, but they do not replace the human ability to ask the right causal questions. Prediction is not advanced math. It is structured curiosity. And yes, history matters. Because most of the future is the past with different branding. People always ask, how did famous investors think like that? They point to names like Warren Buffett and say it is genius. But genius often looks boring. It is just disciplined attention to cycles, economics, and cause and effect. Let me give you an example that will hit hard. In 2020, many people believed inflation was a short-term glitch. Then it became something else. Even when inflation cooled later, real purchasing power did not fully recover for many households. That is the part that broke people's trust. They heard the news, but the grocery receipt kept speaking louder than the press conference. If you had predicted the kind of inflation dynamics that create long-term price stickiness, you would have adjusted earlier. You would have protected your savings differently. You might have avoided certain kinds of debt or built a buffer. You might have shifted how you budget. Even if you could not fully escape the environment, you would have been less defenseless. In 2026, the same logic applies to AI employment risk and housing. Housing affordability across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia did not just worsen temporarily. It detached from wages. That means the future is not your childhood expectation that hard work leads to home ownership. The future is renting longer, postponing the move, and paying more to keep the roof over your head. So how do you predict your housing future? You do it by modeling payment capacity relative to income growth and interest rate constraints. You look at building costs, insurance costs, and local policy. You track how household budgets react when rates change and when climate-driven disruptions hit. Because climate is not a distant concept anymore. In multiple regions, insurance markets are collapsing or becoming unaffordable. That pushes costs into premiums, into property taxes, into rent, into relocation decisions. And if you are not predicting, you are just moving after the damage. Now, here is the cliffhanger built into prediction. Prediction is not about being right all the time. It is about reducing how often you get blindsided. And if you reduce being blindsided, you preserve optionality. Optionality is what lets you jump when opportunities appear. Without optionality, you are trapped reacting. With optionality, you can pivot when the game changes, and the game changes constantly in 2026, but we still have not reached the deepest code, the one that explains why some people can learn faster than systems can break them. The fourth wealth code is that learning is not entertainment. Learning is productivity. Most people treat learning like a hobby they do on weekends. They consume content, they collect notes, they watch videos, and then they go back to their job as if knowledge is something you admire rather than apply. This is why so many people stay normal. The school system trains compliance. It trains test-taking. It trains you to wait for permission to think. It measures IQ, maybe. It does not build financial intelligence. It does not build decision-making under pressure. It does not build cash flow understanding. It does not build system design. So people leave school with degrees and high scores, then discover that their income is capped. They learn too late that information without application is just clutter. And this is where 2026 makes the trap brutally obvious. AI accelerates skill obsolescence. If your learning strategy is passive, you fall behind faster. If your learning strategy ends at the age of 25, you do not just grow slower, you get replaced. That is not fear-mongering. That is the new labor economics reality. People used to have a stable career ladder. In many industries, that ladder is gone. Now, your employability is a renewable resource. If you stop maintaining it, it expires. So learning must be treated like training for performance, not like studying for an exam you already passed. Here is the painful truth nobody wants to hear. Many adults do not fail because they cannot learn. They fail because they do not learn continuously with purpose. They complain that their family did not teach them. They blame luck, they blame the system. But then they keep doing the same behaviors and expect different results. And look around you. Social media is full of passive income dreams. It sells the illusion that freedom is a switch you flip after you buy a course or start a channel. But in reality, the creator economy produces a brutal distribution. Most people make little to nothing. Even those who get views rarely generate stable wealth, because platforms change rules, ad revenue fluctuates, and burnout hits fast. The dream is heavily marketed because it is cheap to sell compared to paying you fairly. Meanwhile, institutions keep building real systems. The same institutions that promised decentralization now control much of crypto's infrastructure through regulation, custody, and capital. Retail traders get treated like liquidity providers, and in 2026,